So I just finished my playthrough of the new indie game Stray, and I figured that I would go ahead and give a little bit of a review of it. So I hope that you'll join me. Let's go ahead and get started. So hello everybody and welcome back to Crossplay Gaming. My name is Eric if you're new to the channel. If you enjoy game streaming, either a variety of PC games or Switch games, or if you enjoy occasional unboxings, or if you enjoy occasional reviews and analysis of games from a Christian perspective, then make sure that you go ahead and leave a like, and make sure that you go ahead and subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you know when new uploads or live streams happen. So maybe you were here and you joined me for my live stream series of Stray. It really was not a terribly long game. Maybe you've heard that if you've watched other reviews. Took me about 3 streams. The middle one was the longest, and then when I got to the third one, I didn't even realize how far into the game that I was, and we ended up finishing it pretty quickly. So there's a few aspects of the game that I think I could break down. The story is pretty interesting. It sort of is a post-apocalyptic world that you find yourself in as a little stray cat, and if you're a fan of cats like I am, then you'll probably really enjoy the mechanics of the game in that way. The movement is pretty fluid, and the little features of being a cat are pretty interesting, being able to interact with the environment in ways that a cat would, except obviously you're a human controlling the cat, and so in that sense the cat character is way smarter than cats generally would be. I don't want to dig into way too many spoilers, but I'll basically summarize and say you find yourself again in this post-apocalyptic world. You end up in basically a robot city underground at the beginning of the game, and you slowly begin to work your way back to the surface, and you begin to get a little bit of a history as to what went down. And along the way, you find yourself with a little robot companion, and your companion begins to find out little things about his own history. And again, no spoilers. I'll go ahead and say that I do recommend the game, and so there's even more reason why I don't want to spoil it. I think there's plenty to be discovered, and so go ahead and try it. Now, the graphics I thought were really good. I liked the art style, the sort of decayed underground city, and the look of it, and the robots. Everything looks very weathered and used and lived in, and it really reflects sort of the history that you find out about. The story is definitely presented in a very intriguing way, in a way that really causes you to continue to work your way through the game, and the game really moves at a pretty steady pace. Now, there are certain aspects of the story that were kind of surprising and fun. Other parts, at least for me, were a little bit more predictable. So there were some plot twists and things you find out about the characters where I went, oh, I guess I didn't see that coming. I mean, I've seen aspects of other stories like that, but I didn't really think that they'd do something like that here, and things like that would kind of surprise me. But then there were some overall themes in sort of the background story that I did find a little bit predictable. And if you watch my playthrough, I made some comments, and I think at least some of the general themes that I predicted did kind of come true. And one negative aspect of that, at least for me, was that some of the typical anti-capitalism you see in a lot of indie games kind of came out, and that's not necessarily my cup of tea. I'm not that big into socialism or socialist sentiments per se.
I'm escaping to the one place that hasn't been corrupted by capitalism. Space!
And then, of course, there was a fair bit of environmentalism sort of under the surface there as well, which to an extent, I suppose, is fine. I mean, I'm all for preserving the planet, sure, but the sort of apocalyptic political discourse surrounding that topic is a little bit much for me, and I don't like to see it work its way into every form of media. And so that's kind of there. And the way this aspect of the story is presented is kind of interesting in that it's very much in the background. You're much more focused on the immediate concerns of the characters and the more interesting things right in front of you. And so these more political story aspects are not central to what you're thinking about throughout the game, but yet as you find out more about the story, it is kind of the reason for the whole story existing. And so is it central? Is it not? I suppose I'll let you decide on that if you play the game. But even with all that aside, the story is still compelling, and it still definitely left a good taste in my mouth overall. Now, the level of challenge in the game was definitely a really interesting balance. the game would basically introduce a mechanic and you would work with it for a while, and then it would sort of let that mechanic go and it would introduce something new. And then you would work with a new mechanic, something else to explore, something else to try out in order to advance. And it basically moves back and forth between things like puzzles and then things like having to have fast reflexes and being chased or something like that, or having to work your way through different environments stealthily and solve puzzles as to how not to be found out in tricky situations. And then there's the occasional fetch quest here and there where you have to work with the different NPCs. Now, some people have complained about the length of the game. Some people like the length of the game. It is a shorter game. It only took me about 3 sessions, and altogether it was maybe only 5 hours of gameplay for me personally. Some have done it a little faster, some have taken a little bit longer and have taken their time to savor it. To me, the length was not an issue at all. I think it was perfectly fine that it was as short as it was. But if there was one thing that made it feel a little shorter, perhaps in a more negative sense, it was not so much the playtime, but for me, it felt like as I worked my way through the game, and I saw all of the mechanics being introduced in each phase of the game, what it felt like was happening to me was that it was introducing you to all these elements, and it was as if they were all going to sort of come together in a culmination at the end of the game where you have to use everything that you've learned, but that's really not what happened. And I hope this isn't too much of a spoiler, but basically what it seemed like to me was you go through each phase of doing these different types of gameplay throughout the game, and then at the very end, it introduces a few puzzles, and then the game ends. And so I was expecting something like, we're going to throw everything you learned at you, and then you're going to sort of prove your skill and beat the game, but then it basically gets to the end of the game and says, no, just do this last couple things, and then we're going to finish the story, and that's it. And so in terms of the story itself and the culmination of all the themes of the game, it was, I think, very satisfying, and it all kind of came together in a fulfilling conclusion, again, in terms of the story, but the culmination of all the actual gameplay mechanics of it seemed to sort of fizzle out rather than culminate into something big. Again, I hope that makes sense, but I think that's the best way I could express it. And so overall, I was pretty surprised by this game. I can see why it's getting as popular as it is. I still enjoy jumping over on Twitch or YouTube and watching people stream it and see their reactions to it. And so if you've played the game, leave your comments below as to what you liked or didn't like, and I'd love to read it. And let me know if you haven't played it, if you plan to, based on what I've said here or what you've heard about it. And so again, my name is Eric. This is Crossplay Gaming. I hope you've enjoyed the review. And again, comment below, tell me what you think. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you know when new uploads happen. And if you're interested in supporting my work either here or over on my theology channel, then links to those things are in the description, whether you want to see my other channel or check out my Subscribestar page or check out my social media. So we will see you all around in the next video or in the next live stream. Thank you so much for watching.